Hey, we are live. Today, we're going to answer a whole bunch of questions because I know the moment you wake up from GWs, you have a one or two questions and they bother your mind and they go over and over and over again, trying to figure out what's going on. But guess what? The more you know, the more you find out, the more questions will come your way and you're going to be blown away by the stuff that you're finding out. So today, I'm going to give you my perspective and my opinions about the questions that you have asked. So yeah, stay with. Okay, here watching today, we are approaching certain subjects that you guys are asking. So there's a whole bunch of questions that I received via comments, and we're gonna try to answer them the best I can. However, I want to remind you that this is just strictly my opinion. This is basically my viewpoint based on what I have researched, what I discovered, and what I experienced. And of course, my opinions and my viewpoints change as more and more evidence and more I educate myself on the subject. If you have any question, please put it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them on the fly. The first one is: the organization Satan's pretending to be an angel of light? Believe it or not, I had exactly the same question. I wanted to know what does it mean to be an angel of light, because Jehovah's Witnesses are using that very often when they see that something is working. So something in this world is really doing well. I don't know, a charity or a certain organization or certain religion is doing really well and they're doing really good work. And they're looking at this, they're looking at the results, and they can't deny it. They simply can't deny that these people are helping. So what they're using is they're saying, oh, this is Satan pretending to be the good guy. So you can join them thinking this is the way. And then you realize before you know it that you're outside of the organization and you're no longer part of the people that will be saved. This is how Satan can trap you, by pretending to be the good guy. Now, the moment I heard it, and I was just a kid, I thought, what if he's pretending to lead this organization? How would we know? How could we test it? Right? If he knows, he's got this amazing knowledge from the very beginning, and he was able to deceive so many people, millions, billions of people were deceived by him, then how can we know that we are not deceived? Right? So, of course, they're coming up with different uh, explanations of why that is and why they know the truth and nobody else does. The truth is, you got to do your own research about this stuff. And when you go through this and we actually ask yourself a critical questions about the supernatural source and whether this individual of Satan and angels and demons and God, whatever, actually exists, you'll see how very little evidence there is to support it. My take on this: no, there is no such person, there is no such creature as Satan. I have not found evidence uh, to believe in this claim. However, if I see any, I'll be happy to examine it. But so far, I have not seen any. Therefore, I don't believe there is an angel of light pretending that everything is good while he's evil. Next question: why didn't I see this before? I'm not stupid. This is also a very common question where Jehovah's Witnesses wake up and they're thinking, what the heck is going on? I am not a dumb person. And people, after many years, people have finished universities. People can figure stuff out, much smarter than me, much smarter than maybe you watching. And they're trying to figure out, how come I did not see this? Because you take them to a place where they have to figure out quantum physics. They have to figure it out, I don't know, forces on bridges and how to design tall buildings, and they'll be able to do it. But then it seems like they were fooled by the craziest myths, and they swallowed it and they believed it, and they were teaching it to others. Now, don't forget that intelligence actually has nothing to do with indoctrination. It's crazy, but it's like brain operates totally on two different wavelengths when it comes to religion and everything else. When you go, I don't know, to I don't know, Iran or Iraq or any of those places, you see there's a lot of people who are very, very smart. You go to Dubai, you see what people built over there. It's extraordinary, okay? And they're capable of building amazing buildings. They're capable of doing extraordinary mathematics and so on. And yet, at the same time, these people believe that Muhammad jumped on a winged horse, flew to the moon, and cut it in half. Now, for most Christians, they'll be looking at them like, what's wrong with you? It's a myth. It sounds crazy. Why do you people believe it? And yet, when you ask a Christian, well, did Elijah jump on a chariot and flew to the sky? Of course. Why would you question that? Right? It's interesting when it comes to indoctrination. It's not that we are dumb. It's almost like we accept the reality that we are presented with. And for us, our mind, our subconscious mind, is constantly looking for justification, right? So if we see a result, we want to know the cause. And if we can't find the cause, if there's no logical explanation to the result, then we're making up stories. And it's been happening for thousands of years, where people make up stories in order to justify what is happening. So if they saw lightning and thunder, they created a supernatural source called Thor. They gave him a hammer, right? They fire from his eyes, lightning coming, and they had the explanation. Because our mind is constantly trying to connect the dots, right? What is the cause of this? I see the results. I don't understand the cause. So somebody came up with an explanation, and it was good enough for us. Magic, this God or that God did it. And if God did it, God can do anything. You don't have to look for answers anymore. And it's in every religion, without exception. And if we were born in it, or if we're surrounded by people who believe it, the chances are we're going to accept what they told us, simply because there was no better explanation that was given to us, right? It's almost like a Truman Show. I don't know if you watched that movie, but this guy lived in a in a dome and accepted everything as real, simply because that's how he was presented to him, even though everything around him was fake. And at the end, he was like, how is it that I didn't see it? You can only see that your house is falling apart if you leave the house. When you're in it, everything looks normal. But when you go outside and like, oh yeah, look at the foundations, yeah, they're cracking. Oh, look at the settlement. Look at this. Look at that. Look at the cracks. If you can't see the cracks from the inside. When we're outside of the organization, when we're outside of the code, now we look back and then we're connecting the dots. Like, oh my gosh, now I see what's really happening. You're not stupid. It has nothing to do whether you're smart or stupid. It's literally, that's how the indoctrination works. And a lot of it is acceptance of reality that was presented to us. And no matter how intelligent you are, everybody could be fooled. And we're being fooled right now by media, by commercial world, by politicians, because that's what they're presenting to us. And we have no reason to question it. And if we have no reason to question it, you will accept it as truth. 3, why do I feel so free and light? Oh, this is a really good one. Because you were carrying enormous amount of weight of guilt, enormous amount of weight of how much work you had to do. And the biggest one of them all is you never felt good enough. There was never such thing as you did enough, because it was always you can do more. This is what you gotta do. You gotta do this. You gotta do this. You guys are doing great, and you can do more. That was a speech of every circle of his year. Every time he came, every 6 months, right? He would say, "This is what you guys doing. This is where you can improve." And because of this, we constantly judged ourselves, thinking, "Oh, there is more that I can do." Right? There were talks with that title: "Can you do more in the service for Jehovah?" So this constant guilt trip of you can do more. Are you doing more? Right? We know there are people in Africa that are walking 10 kilometers one way with in waters full of crocodiles, and they're walking in a 40-degree heat, and they're making this. What's your excuse? Traffic in your air-conditioned car, you couldn't make it to the convention, right? So there was constant this guilt trip. Plus, the worst of them all was blood on your hands. They would say, "Hey, you know what? If you're not preaching," what was it? Tony Morris said that if you're not preaching for 2 weeks, then you already have blood on your hands, because somebody will die because you didn't preach to them. Well, first, what you got to do is to figure it out who's going to do the killing. Not you. You're not planning to kill anybody. But the 144,000 that's supposed to go to heaven and come back and later on slaughter everybody, they're the ones that will be doing the killing. So they should feel guilty, because they're going door to door saying, "Join my religion, or I'm going to come back later on and kill you." Yeah. No, don't do that. Don't kill people. Don't threaten people either. So you feel free and light because enormous amount of burden came off of your shoulders. I tell you what, when I woke up, I was still an elder, and I was like, I would say halfway woke up, Pimo, and I started changing my talks from "you can do more" to "you guys did more than enough." I can't even express to you what that did to the congregations. People were running towards me to thank me for the talk. Okay. One one Jehovah's Witness lady said, 7 years she's been coming to the Kingdom Hall, and she has never felt such encouraging talk. She feels like all this weight off of her shoulders came off. And this is the first time she feels like she might be able to make it to the new system. And it's not because I magically removed it from her. It's just simply, I said, listen, I said simple things that are in the Bible, right? That back then I still believed. I said, listen, you think the guy hanging next to Jesus did more work than you did? I mean, he was a criminal, for crying out loud, and he felt like he deserves to die in a cruel way. Jesus said, oh, if somebody gave a glass of water to a prophet, he will have the same reward as a prophet. You think you did more than that? Right? So I removed that weight from people, and oh boy, people were seeking me. And on the convention, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is the brother that gave the talk in my congregation. I will never forget it," because they're so burdened. So if you left this, don't be surprised that you feel so free and light, because an enormous amount of burden was lifted off of your shoulder. Great job from Canada, critical thinker. Okay, cool. I like critical thinking. Next one, is this life all there is? You didn't lose paradise on earth. You didn't lose life in heaven with some angels and stuff like that. You lost a delusion. And to be honest, the life that you have is extraordinary. You just probably took it for granted. If you would think about any time in the history of humankind, and you could actually press a button and move back in time, where would you go? When would you go? To what time? When was it better than now? If you were a king or a pharaoh or some sort of ruler back 200, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and you had to go to a dentist, you got pregnant and you had complications, if your appendix burst, when was it better time than now? See, we take for granted the fact that we have clean water, adjust the temperature nicely, we have lights, and we can communicate the way we communicate right now around the world with pretty much for free for an average Joe. How is that possible? We did this. Humans did this. And we're living in the most extraordinary times, and we have a life that most kings and pharaohs couldn't possibly dream of. Think about it. How did they travel? How did they listen to music? What kind of food they were eating, especially in the wintertime? Right? What kind of medical conditions they had? What kind of schools they had? What kind of transportations that they had? Think about it. You jumping in the car on a winter day, heated seats, right? Music, comfortable steering. Now you want the car to drive itself. Oh my gosh. The things that we will see in the near future, 5, 10 years from now, will be extraordinary because everything grows exponentially. The technology grows exponentially. We're going faster and faster. Yes, it is. We have challenges, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, an average life of a human gets better and better. The problems that most people in the world, developed world, have, it's nothing compared to the life that we had before. Yes, this life is not all there is, but it's truly extraordinary. And it's time to smell the roses and appreciate the times that we're living in. 5. Why does God allow cults to use his name to do evil? Well, study a little bit about the history of religion and history of God and how God's evolved and how people always use God as an excuse to do evil things. Read the Bible and see how cruel one nation would treat another nation and what they would do in the name of God. They said, "My God told me I'm going to promised land. You're not the promised land. You're just on my way to the promised land, and therefore I need to destroy everybody here, kill men, women, children, even animals, because you're on my way." That was normal. It's a horrible thing that you read those things, but people did enormous harm one to another. And in order to convince another person to say it's okay, they would use God to justify it. They say if there was no God, the difference would be good people would be doing good things and bad people would be doing bad things. But if you want good people to do evil things, use religion. And that's what I think happens, where even I see my own family members, which I love dearly, and I know they love me, but they're capable of doing very cruel things like shunning, for example, or trying to hurt me and my family by harming our reputation and trying to destroy all our relationships and friendships simply because they believe they're doing the right thing. They believe that they're doing this out of love because they're trying to save me from being destroyed at Armageddon. That's what religion does. They scaring people by saying, "Oh, you know what? If you don't do what we tell you, therefore God will punish you. You will not survive." Or in other religions, they use hell. Or in maybe you're gonna come back as a cockroach if you reincarnated. There is always some sort of punishment for not following the rules in every religion. Cults are worse because they're so close together and they're a lot more fanatical. They're a lot more dogmatic about their rules. They have stronger rules than mainstream religions, but believe me, a lot of religions they have those rules as well. Next one, 6. Does governing body believe what they preach? I think so. I believe they have doubts. I believe they individually maybe don't express them publicly, but individually they do have doubts. But overall, majority of them believe the things that they do. Why do they say? Why do I say that? Well, reading Crisis of Conscience, Raymond Friends was there for 9 years. He wasn't there for 6 months. He was there for 9 years, and he believed in majority of the doctrines for the time that he was there. Plus, he said even if he had certain questions and certain doubts, he would not express it to others. And if he did, even just hinting, people showed fear and there was no open dialogue. And when people acknowledged to him that something doesn't add up here, the moment they walk into the room and they were together as a collective in the room with other governing body members, they all kind of gave into fear and they would not express themselves freely. I can, from my own experience, I remember this when one-to-one conversations with another elder, I would say, oh, this is what we should talk about during the elders meeting because I see this as a problem. I walk into that room, I mention this problem, and I see the other guy like literally scared, like he no voice. He was too afraid to speak against majority because majority disagreed, and he was just too afraid to go against it. So I think the fear is on every level, including the governing body members. I also spoke with people who were in Bethel working with governing body members, and they all told me that from their experience, they think that they believe it, that the delusion is so deep that they actually believe what they're preaching. If they didn't, most likely they would end up like Raymond France. Sooner or later, the conscience would not allow them to do this, and they would leave. And now, obviously, there are certain things I don't understand. I don't understand, for example, why they wouldn't fix um, the two witness rule for pedophile cases and stuff like this. That goes beyond me. I don't have an answer for that. But when it comes to doctrines, I think most of them believe what they preach. 7, how to live life without God. Well, from my own experience, because I'm no longer a believer, I think you always lived without God. You just had like an invisible friend. And just like a child that at one point realizes, oh, there is no Santa Claus, you might be shocked that what do you mean there's no Santa Claus? Where do the presents come from? And how people, like I was living for that moment when I'm going to be rewarded for my good behavior. And I was scared that I'm going to be punished if I'm going to be a bad boy or a bad child. Well, it's time to grow out of this and say, you know what? I'm responsible for my life, and nobody else will rule what my life is, and I dictate what is good in my life. And life without God, at the beginning, I remember when I lost my faith, it was crushing. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. It was crushing. I was very depressed, and I felt like, oh man, if there is no paradise, if there is no hope for a beautiful house and a panda in my backyard and living forever, then it's kind of a pointless to live altogether, right? So it was crushing, and I even had suicidal thoughts. It's really crushing, but at the same time, I realized how amazing the life that I have really is. And the things that I mentioned already, I'm not going to repeat, but I started appreciating every moment, appreciating the life that I have, appreciating the time that I have with my family, appreciating the fact that I'm living in such an amazing times and what I can and cannot do. And every day became more precious. It's almost like when you're in a desert and you're really thirsty and somebody gives you a glass of water, right? That glass of water has enormous amount of value. But the moment I give you 2 glasses of water, the value starts lowering. The moment I give you 10 bottles of water, then it's less valuable. The moment I give you an entire lake full of water that you can drink, and now I no longer want the whole thing. It's too much. So I realized that the things in life that we truly cherish, most of them are in short supply. And when we realize that our life is in a short supply, you have a dash the day when you were born and the day you're going to die. And the clock is ticking, and you don't know how much time you have left. You may think, oh, maybe I have 30, 40, 50 years still to go. Well, if you survive, you don't know if you're going to survive because you don't know when your day of death will be. But whatever the time is, that's how precious that life should be for you. Okay. Because no matter what you're doing, that's all what you have. And that's why it is so precious. We got, okay, thank you so much for the great video. Keep on helping exposing this dangerous and deadly cult. You can save lives and others. And it is true. Many people already commented on this, that their lives were saved because they were thinking about suicide. They were in years of therapy. They couldn't get rid of certain fears and certain challenges. And sometimes I talked to them for like an hour simply because I understood how they feel. And I told them what they did the work, but I told them what helped me and what could help them. And they said their suicidal thoughts were gone from one day to the next. And that's what you can do too. Don't think that all those years that you've been a witness were wasted. No, if you use it to help somebody else, you will see how your experience is invaluable. Okay, there were many things that you have learned in your school, high school, college, or even university that you will never use in your life, and you don't feel resentment towards that organization that they were teaching you things that were useless. Don't feel the same way towards the Jehovah's Witness organization. You gave your time to them, right? You were not paying for their education. You willingly were going there. The moment you move it outside of your parents' home, it was all on you. So people are saying, "Oh, you know what? I made this decision to be a witness when I was 7 years old, 8 years old, way too young to make the decision." True, but did you keep with that decision after you moved out of your parents' home? Did you continue going to service? Did you continue going to all the meetings? Did you read their magazines? Did you support them financially for years after? If you did, then you didn't make the decision one time when you were a kid. You were making the decision to be a witness every single day when you remained as a witness until you woke up and you said, I no longer want to represent this. Right? So don't think like, oh, they tricked me back then and so on. No, if you decide it, then take that responsibility upon yourself that, yes, maybe I was tricked when I was young, but when I was an adult, it was my decision. I chose to be based on the knowledge and skills and understanding that I had. That was the best decision that I made. Today, with my knowledge, I wouldn't make the decision, but you can't go back in time. What you could do is use that example, use that experience to make sure that you will never be tricked the same way again. That you're not going to become a victim of another cult. You're not going to become a victim of another narcissistic relationship because you already know the pattern, you recognize the pattern, and this experience will protect you from the future damage. It can be very useful. And if you use it to teach others and you help them, then you'll see how your experience can be extremely valuable. Okay. 8. What is the truth now? Oh, that is. I made a video about what is the truth now. Truth is challenging, but I tell you what, there's only one truth. Okay, and we have to change the definition. What is the truth? Because as witnesses, we believe that the truth is the organization. Right? You would say, I am in the truth. I left the truth. People join the truth. People are outside the truth, inside the truth. They basically viewed organization as the truth. And by changing the definition of the word what is the truth, they basically locked people's mind. Because the moment you say I know the truth is the moment you're no longer doing research. What's the point of doing research if you already know the truth? You're not going to question something that is true, right? It's like constantly trying to figure it out. What time the sun will rise. Well, once you know the pattern, right? Then it's set. It's true, right? We can mathematically calculate exactly at what time will be sunrise, what time will be sunset. And the same thing with this. The moment you say, I know the truth, there's no longer need for research. The problem happens when you realize what you believed is the truth is no longer the truth. So now you're like, well, what is the truth? Where you got to start is you got to start redefining the word truth. Truth, the definition of the word truth is everything that agrees with reality. Everything that is factual and agrees with reality. Now, when you realize that that is the definition of the truth, then you can't say that the religion is the truth, that the organization is the truth. It's everything that is real and agrees with the reality and is factual. And when it comes from these premises, then you got to figure it out that there's in your mind, okay, there's actually 3 levels of what we call truth. One is objective truth. Objective truth is outside of your mind. It's not something you believe in. It just exists as is. That's what, no matter whether you believe it or not, it exists as reality. 2 + 2 = 4. That is a true statement, and we can teach our phone to make that calculation. And it doesn't matter what you believe in, and everybody will agree on this, no matter what religion you're in, no matter what color of the skin you are, no matter where you come from. And if we destroy all the books, and 1,000 years from now we start doing this experiment, we'll come up to the same conclusions, because that is an objective truth. Objective truth is something that is outside of our mind, and we're constantly trying to figure it out. What is the objective truth? That's why we use science, and I believe that the best way of trying to figure it out what is real is through scientific method. Okay, so we come up with hypothesis, then we test it the best we can, then we observe the results, and then if it matches our hypothesis, great. If it doesn't, we go back to the drawing board and we test it again and again. And the best way to eliminate our biases, if we come up with a hypothesis, we ask many different people to do the tests, and we don't talk to each other. This is how research is done. They spread this theory, not theory, hypothesis, among scientists, and they're trying to figure it out what is the truth through testing and mathematical equations. And once they come up with their findings, they present this to others, and they see, oh, what did you come up with? What did you come up with? What results did you see? And then they compared one with another, and they see, oh, you have the same results, you have the same results, you have the same results. We didn't talk to each other. We came up with the same results. That means we have the best chances of knowing the truth. And at that point, they don't say it's the truth. They say it is a theory. And in scientific world, when they say it's a theory, is the highest way of knowing whether something is true. That doesn't mean it is true. It means basically based on the information and evidence that we can test, this is the best explanation. So we have the theory of gravity, theory of thermodynamics, theory of germs. All those things are theories, because we understand that tomorrow we can discover something else, and now we got to change what we believe is true. The truth doesn't change, just what we perceive it to be changes. So you got the objective truth, then you have something that puts us in trouble, and that is called authoritative truth. Authoritative truth is basically happening when you watch somebody and you take that person as an authority figure. You know they're smarter than you because they've been on the subject for longer than you. They had more education than you, and you believe that they know better than you. Okay, and it happens all the time, and you have to trust experts. You jump into your car, you got to trust the people who put it together. You trust that they have a brakes and then it will work, and you trust that other people will also follow the rules on the road. You have to trust others. There is no, you wouldn't be able to live without the trust. But the problem is when somebody in authority makes a mistake and you took their word for it, then you're paying for that mistake. So if you go to a dentist and the dentist says, well, I'm going to fix your tooth, and they screw up, you trusted them as person with an authority in this field, and they make a mistake, you're going to pay for the mistake, right? If you trust a politician, maybe you vote for him, and then he screws up, you're paying for that mistake. If you trust a religious leader and he screws up, your life will be screwed up because of it, right? So I would say be very careful who you put on that shelf as this person is my authority, because their mistakes will be your mistakes. Okay. And we got to be careful. That doesn't mean you got to reject everybody. I'm just saying everybody makes mistakes. So do you. And when we accept somebody else's truth as what they're saying, oh, this makes sense, just leave yourself a margin of error, saying, you know what, I'm making mistakes. They might make a mistake. They're telling me this because that's what they believe. That doesn't mean it's true. It's just, it sounds convincing to me, right? And the third truth that is in your mind is your personal experience. You have five senses. You experience the world with the five senses. Whatever you see, hear, touch, smell, or taste, you're going to take as truth. And guess what? Even your own brain will trick you. It will trick you many times. I mean, there's a whole industry of magicians. They rely on your brain tricking you. They present you one thing and then they do something and you go like, that's impossible, right? But our brain, our subconscious mind can trick us, especially when we have very strong biases. And there is something called pareidolia, okay? And it's something when we start connecting dots and seeing patterns in things that there is no pattern. We just made it up. And this is where people see Jesus on the pancake. This is where they see Holy Mary coming from heaven on the cloud, right? And they're connecting those dots because that's what they believe in. And we have that, right? There is something also called reticular activating system in your brain. When I tell you, don't think of a red car, don't think about red car. Whatever car you're thinking about, don't think about red car. Well, you're gonna think about red car whether you want it or not. And if you buy a red car, guess what? Now, wherever you drive, you're gonna see red cars, right? It's because that's what you focus on. Whatever is your brain that will start focusing on, that's what you're gonna see. And if you believe something to be true, then you're gonna find things that will connect to what you believe in, and you're gonna be intelligent in that pattern. So your subconscious mind will pick up things that are trained to pick up. So if you're sitting in the bus and everybody's talking and it's loud and you hear nothing, you're just reading something or whatever, all of a sudden at the other side of the bus, somebody says, and last week in the Kingdom Ministry, we read about this presentation. And you're gonna be like, huh? How is it that you didn't understand anybody else's conversation? But the people on the other side, all of a sudden, your brain picked that up, right? How come? It's because that's what your brain was trained to look for, certain patterns. And that's what the brain does. Constantly looks for this kind of patterns of recognizing of what's really going on. So be careful, because you could be looking for patterns that are not there, and you're convinced that they exist because your mind was programmed to look for them. You turn on the news, you hear about the war, and you're like, yep, last days, that's what they told me. Maybe they're right. And you're starting connecting the dots because that's what your subconscious mind was programmed to do. Be very careful about this, because the biases that we all have can be very strong even years after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses. And critical thinking has to be learned how to use. Okay, next one. What should I tell my kids? Oh, that's a good question. What should I tell my kids? I had that problem. I woke up, my wife didn't. We have 2 kids. What do I tell them? For years, I've been teaching them from my book of Bible stories and reading them a whole bunch of things from the Bible and preparing them for the meetings. And all of a sudden, I realized the whole thing is BS. Ugh. My wife says, don't you dare tell them anything. You're going to mess them up. They have cousins. They have friends. We had 27 kids in our congregation under the age of 18. 27. It was like a freaking kindergarten. Every second weekend, there was a party, sleepover, picnic. There was always something going on. Like for kids, they loved it. Most kids don't like going to the Kingdom Hall because why? Because it's boring for them. My kids, they couldn't wait because they could see so many of their friends. End of the meeting, they all go to the second class and they're all play over there. It was like this paradise for kids in our congregation. So my wife says, don't you dare tell them anything. You're going to mess them up. And it was really tough because I'm like, if I tell them, it will mess them up. Like mom is teaching them one thing, I'm teaching them something else. And what are the kids are going to think? I tell you, I grew up in that environment because my father was a Catholic, my mom Jehovah's Witness, and my father took me to the Catholic church, and my mother was taking me to the Kingdom Hall. And at the beginning, when you're a kid, you're messed up. But you know what? I chose to be a witness. I didn't like going to Catholic church. There was no washrooms in a church, and it was always cold, especially in the winter. It was unbearable, and it was boring as hell because every time it was the same thing. When we had Jehovah's Witness meetings, at least the meetings were different, and it was warm, and you could sit. So it was totally different. I prefer that. But when you're in that environment, okay, when my father would Sunday turn on the priests, and we had to listen through the radio, right? He wanted us to learn about being a Catholic. It's tough for kids because they have to make up their own mind. But tell you what, you don't have control over your kids. You think you do, even when they're small. I was very young when my father was trying to convince me to be a Catholic, and I'm sorry, even a very young age, what I learned, that you should not bow down to statues because of Abra, Shadrach, and Abednego. That story was in my mind, already taught by my mom. I went to church and I see everybody down on their knees and bowing down to Holy Mary. And I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't know. I think I was like 7 years old. I'm like, I ain't bowing down to this. No way. And then my father's like, get on your knees. Get on. I'm like, no, you want to get on your knees? You go on your knees. I'm not bowing down to the 2 bags of cement painted as blue and white. That's crazy. And I had that conviction. And I actually am glad that Jehovah's Witnesses told me, to how to stand up for my beliefs, how to have that courage from the young age. And no matter who's standing in front of you, and it doesn't matter that everybody else is bowing down, you're the only one not to. You still have to stand up for what you believe in. And I'm grateful for that, to be honest, because he gave me that kind of a strength and courage to later on stand up against Jehovah's Witnesses and say, you know what? I believe something different. I know that people might not be happy to hear what I have to say, but I'm going to say it. And I was wondering, like, why am I scared of talking to my kids? If I believe that what I believe is right, then I have to. It's my like obligation to tell my kids. And I heard this voice in my head. I just imagined myself maybe 10 or 20 years later when the kids would come to me and would say, Dad, what the hell? What? Why didn't you warn us? We just woke up from all this and we realized the whole thing is a scam. And I know you didn't tell us. You knew about this and you lied to us for all those years. And now we have to deal with our spouses and we have to deal with our kids. So I said, no, I don't care how big of a hit I'm going to take. It has to end. I am a third generation. Okay. Because my grandma was a witness. I'm a third generation. It has to stop. I cannot pass this on to my kids because you know what? They're going to pass this on to their kids and their kids and their kids. If I stop it, okay, I'm going to take a hit. I'm going to lose my family. I don't know who I'm going to lose, but I'm not going to pass this on for generations to come because you don't know how many generations in the future will be witnesses if I don't stop this. So I would say, you know what? Whatever you believe is right, teach your kids. At the same time, you don't have control over them. You have control over babies. And as they grow older, your control over them is getting smaller. And the only thing you have at best is influence. And the best influence is by your example. You can demand stuff from your kids, but believe me, sooner or later, they will do whatever they want to do. And the more rules you put as you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, as they grow older, they will only find out a way to lie to you and go their own way. That's what we did to my father. He said, you're not allowed to go to service. You're going to tell me not to go to service? Guess what? I'm going to pretend that I'm going to my friend. I'm going to change my clothes behind the house. I'm going to go to my grandma and change my clothes or whatever it takes. And then we just lie to him. Don't allow that with your kids. You're better off being honest. Teach them to be honest and have a good relationship, good rapport with your kids. Even if they disagree with you, it still teach them that it's okay to disagree and you can still be family and you can still love each other no matter what. Okay, that is extremely important, and you accept them, even if they choose to be witnesses. If they choose to baptize and live and get married with witnesses. That's their life, not yours. You choose whatever you believe is right. You teach them whatever you believe is right, and do not create that barrier that if they think differently, then they're no good already. Right? Show them what Jehovah's Witnesses don't know is the unconditional love. That's what they need to see. Okay, next one. How to tell my family I no longer believe. Oof, oof. I didn't know how to tell my wife. I was scared. I was in this room and I was trying to download Crisis of Conscience. I was terrified. My hand was shaking. I'm like, demon is gonna come to my house. I was reading underneath the covers, right? Not to show to my wife. I would drive 2 blocks away, sit in the car, and I would read Crisis of Conscience. I was scared that she would find out. But when I realized that the whole thing is wrong, I'm like, what am I going to tell her? How am I going to tell her? And to be honest, at the beginning, of course, I was very emotional. I didn't do the right thing. I said too much. too strong, didn't know how to navigate through this because I was very emotional, right? If I would go back in time and I didn't know how to start the conversation, I would start it like this. I would say, if your friend, okay, is married, imagine your friend is married, and you found out that their spouse is cheating on them, would you tell your friend? Would you tell your best friend? And if they say yes, then keep asking questions. You say, well, if you would tell them, you do realize they could destroy the marriage. You do realize they would maybe break up that family. You do realize that maybe they'll have a limited access to their kids. You do realize they don't have anybody else. You do realize that they're relying on their husband financially, right? And that news can completely devastate them. Would you still tell them? And if they say yes, right, then you can keep asking. Say, well, what if that happened to you, right? Like, would you want to know? And if they say yes, that they would rather know the bitter truth than the sweetest lie, most of us would. And then you say, you know what? I'm going to tell you something, not because my goal is to destroy your faith, but I just love you and respect you enough that I believe that you should hear this from me. And if at any point you say you don't want to know, then I'll stop. But I feel that if I don't tell you, I will never be able to forgive myself if I see that you're being hurt and I didn't warn you. Now, it's very important to convince the other person that you have their best interests at heart. You're not there to prove them wrong. You're not there to prove yourself right. You're there because you see that they will be damaged, that their life will be hurt and altered. And there's things in their life that are happening because they are witnesses and they're not aware of the damage that causes. That is very important because I told my wife a whole bunch of stuff that she didn't care about. Told about overlapping generation. She's like, I don't care. 607 is wrong. I don't care. 1914 is wrong. I don't care. I'm like, what do you care about? It's crazy. Like, so many doctrines are wrong and you don't care. Like, I don't care. Nobody has it right. You think you're gonna go to another church, you're gonna find everything that you agree with, whatever the priest is saying. Every church has something wrong with it, right? Nobody's perfect. I don't care about some doctrines from thousands of years ago. Who cares? I'm like, oh my God. But when I touched upon blood issue, right? I said, listen, you do not understand everything about the blood fractions, blood transfusion, storing of the blood, and all that stuff. And I can't have this conversation with you in the operating room. It will be too late. We have 2 kids. If something were to happen to our kids, we need to have this discussion right now. And I want to make sure that if something happens to you, and they will ask me, what are your wishes? Because I'm your husband. They will ask me first. I want to represent you and your will, not mine. But in order to do this properly, I need to understand what are your wishes when it comes to blood fractions, when it comes to blood transfusion or storing of the blood or all the other different procedures, because I want to make sure that I present your will. At the same time, I really need you to educate yourself on this, because I don't want you to make a decision that will alter your life or our kids out of ignorance. And what I did was I printed out one chapter from In Search of Christian Freedom. The chapter discusses life and blood. And I gave it to her and I said, you don't have to read anything else. You don't have to even agree with this, but please read this one chapter, because this one chapter explains this issue a lot better than I could explain it to you right now. So let's just read it and then we'll discuss and we'll make the decision together. But I want to make sure that you understand it before you make your final decision on this, right? And you could disagree with it. Don't think that just because you're reading it, you have to accept it as truth. And she agreed. She was not like, oh yeah, let me read it. No, like, okay, fine. And she put it in the drawer and it was sitting there for like 3 months. And then I had to grab it and said, okay, we're going for a trip. Let's just read it together because I see that you have a hard time touching it because there's a demon in it. Don't forget. And then we read it together, and that started opening up her eyes, right? So it's not an easy conversation, but if you convince them that what you're doing is for their good, and they're gonna feel it. They're gonna feel if you try to manipulate them. They're gonna feel if you try to prove them wrong. They're gonna feel if you try to prove that you're right, and it's only gonna create a wall. But if they feel inside their gut and heart, they feel that you want the best for them, then and only then you will start influencing them. You will never control them, right? You will create the opposite effect, but you have a chance to influence them. Okay, next question. Should I believe the Bible? Well, there were 3 steps basically. First, you got to figure it out. Those 3 questions. Are Jehovah's Witnesses the true religion? Is the Bible the Word of God? And does God exist? Those 3 questions will be pretty much inevitable, and you will sooner or later have to answer those questions yourself. And it's not easy to answer those questions, but you do one at a time. So for Jehovah's Witnesses, this is how it was my process. For Jehovah's Witnesses, the reason why I realized that they are the true religion is because I only saw the good, because that's the only thing they were presenting to us. All the people who had a terrible life outside of their organization, they became witnesses, and their life got so much better, right? If somebody was in jail, belongs to a gang, drugs or whatever, and then they met witnesses, and then voila, look, they clean up their life. So we saw the benefits of being a witness, and it was constantly enforced in us every time we went. And if we see only good, and you kind of block and turn your blind eye, or you never heard about the evil and dirty side of Watchtower, and then of course you're gonna come up with this conclusion that they are the true religion. But when you see the good, bad, and ugly, then and only then you can come to the conclusion, maybe there's more to the story. And then you come to a conclusion, oh, you know what? It's just like any other religion. And in many cases, it is much worse than an average Christian. Then I took it to the next step. I'm reading the Bible, and I started reading from the New Testament. And when I read the New Testament, I absolutely loved it. I loved it. I was like, I'm reading a book. It felt like it was a book that I never read before. Quite extraordinary. And I loved it. The message was very clear. It was almost like the burden of being not enough was coming off of my shoulders, because I felt like, oh, the message is clear for all Christians: believe in Christ and you will be saved, right? You didn't have to file the report. There's no pioneering. There's no every month you got to submit your report and place some magazines and try to earn your salvation, and then you do all this work and maybe then you will be saved. No, the message in the Bible was very clear: believe in Christ and you will be saved. There was no need for being baptized, because the guy right next to Jesus, he believed in him and he was promised to be in paradise already. The people who were actually baptized, they were being baptized, thousands of people in one day, 3,000 one day, 5,000 another day, right? The same day. They just said, I believe in Christ. Here's water. Let's get baptized. It was very simple message. And I absolutely loved it. I'm like, man, this whole burden that Jehovah's Witnesses created doesn't have to be there. But then I started looking at everything with a fine comb. And I could be talking about 1 hour, at least 1 hour, many hours about the Bible. But when I look at the good, bad, and ugly about the Bible, then I started looking at it a little bit more objectively. And when I started reading from the very beginning, I'm like, well, if I read it objectively, if this is the inspired word of God, then it should have no errors, should have no contradictions. It should be clearly expressed to us so we could believe it as the truth. And starting from very first chapter, right? And it says that in 6 days, God created everything. Now, I know what you're going to say. Jehovah's Witnesses, most Christianity don't believe in a 6-day creation, not 1 week of 24-hour days. But that's because today they have that understanding. But for thousands of years, people understood a day to be a 24-hour day. And in that first chapter, it says there was a morning, there was an evening, day one. There was a morning, there was an evening, day two. So how could you have a morning and evening if it was not a 24-hour day? Some people say, well, the morning and evening is like a beginning and end. But the first verse says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. So the word beginning was used in the first verse. Why wasn't the same word used for the other days, a beginning of day of creation and the end of the day of creation? No, morning and evening. People for thousands of years, only recently they started thinking, well, maybe it was something else. For a very long time believed, oh, God created everything in 1 week. That's one. Second, it talks about a firmament that is above the earth. And there are waters below and there are waters above, and the firmament separated the waters above from the waters below. And underneath this firmament, there is a sun and there is a moon and there are stars. And we live in like a flat disk with a little like a tent. That's how Hebrews believed the world to be. Well, I don't believe in that model anymore. I believe we're on a sphere flying through space. I don't believe that, as the Bible describes, that the earth is unmovable. I think it constantly moves. Even the earth, that, there's all the continents are constantly moving. Everything is in a constant motion. I don't believe he has four corners. I don't believe he has pillars, unmovable pillars. All those beliefs were back then, but not anymore. And when you ask yourself critical thinking questions like, who wrote this? If he was inspired by God, Almighty God, then why would he put this stuff in there that doesn't simply make sense? At least it didn't make sense to me. Day four, after the trees are already here and everything's growing, God makes a sun. Well, it doesn't make sense. You keep on reading, and then the snake is talking. Snake that apparently has legs, right? And then later on, because he talked to Eve, God removed his legs from his body. And because woman, didn't obey God, so God made her and all the billions of women to be in pain every time they deliver a child. That's God's punishment for what Eve did. And then, of course, all the sin and death later on to everybody else. And it's weird when you actually read the story with an objective mind and you're looking at it and you're like, God is walking around the Garden of Eden. Adam, Eve, where are you? Why are you hiding? They're hiding from God, right? Well, here we are. Well, why are you hiding? Well, because we're naked. They're having this conversation, right? And it's odd when you think about it, right? Almighty God didn't know what was going on. And then you keep on reading. You read the story of Noah. For me, the story of Noah also completely didn't make sense, because when you think about it, there's this one guy in the middle of Turkey, close to Mount Ararat, and gathered all the animals there. And then after the flood, they somehow from here, whatever it is, spread to all the continents and jump over the oceans and start living there. 6.5 million different species. That means he had to take 13 million animals into the ark. And if he just took kinds, because some people say, well, he just took kinds, not all species. That means 4,000 years ago, there was only 7,000 kinds of animals. And from 7,000 kinds, the evolution exploded to 6.5 million species. And of course, they had to jump over the oceans and stuff. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that the person who wrote the story had no idea about that North America existed, that South America existed, that Australia existed, right? He just thought maybe there's 100 animals on this planet, on this earth, and maybe there is, some water around, some water above, and Water came from the underneath and flooded everything. And later on, small amount of animals survived because that's all what he knew. And with that knowledge, that story, maybe there was a flood. Maybe there was a guy who saved some animals on a boat. I don't know. Maybe. But was it global? I don't believe it. Right? So you start thinking critically. I remember when I was a witness and I was reading the Bible for the first time, I read the end of Deuteronomy where it says how Moses died and what happened to him after he died. And even though I read it, I still believe Moses wrote that book. And when you think about it, it's impossible for somebody who died to write about how he died and what happened to him after. Um, but you know what? Because you're so biased, you're just going through it like, okay, next, read it. You take everything as truth. I accepted it as truth. And then I started asking myself critically those questions like, how is it possible for Moses to write about his death? No, it's not possible. So now I got to come up with a story. Oh, maybe it was Joshua who added the last chapter. Maybe somebody else wrote it. That now you're twisting the story, right? You start digging and find out who actually wrote this. Who wrote this? You read this book of Job. Satan goes to heaven and talks to God. And God is like, hey, Satan, what are you doing here? Where you've been? Oh, I walk around the earth. Oh, yeah? Okay. Did you see my friend Job over there? Yeah, I saw him. I'm like, who the heck was there taking notes of what these two were talking to? And what was the conversation about? Who made those notes? Who understood? Who heard that voice in heaven? Did you ever ask yourself that question? You just accept it as that's how it was. That's it. Inspired by God. Okay, fine. If it's inspired by God, unquestionably, then you flip a few pages later, and then all of a sudden now you have Leviathan that has lights coming out of his eyes and flames inside his belly and smoke that cannot even come through his teeth because his teeth are sealed. And all of a sudden, wow, that mythical animal didn't really exist. Well, if you don't believe that that mythical creature existed, then why do we believe that the whole story really took place? You had to cherry pick data. And that's what I realized, that I'm cherry picking data about the Bible. Okay. And I can't do that. Just like I'm cherry picking data about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm learning only what's good. And I'm kind of closing my eyes on what doesn't make sense. And that's why I believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are the truth. If you know good, bad, and ugly, then your perspective changes. And when I read the Bible, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't make sense to me. I see that maybe some of the events really did take place, but unfortunately, people have this tendency of adding legends and myths to the real events. I believe that Muhammad existed. There was more than enough evidence to convince me and most of the people out there that he was a real historical figure. I believe he existed, but I don't believe that he flew to the moon on a winged horse and split it in half. I believe that that story was added, but just because it's in their holy book, they don't question it. They think that is for real. But I tell you what, that doesn't mean that Elijah flew to heavens on a chariot. I see the same pattern. A real events, added a little bit of myth or a legend, make it holy, don't question it. Nobody could question the Bible for what, 1500 years, because Catholic Church was controlling what's in it. They chose the books. There were thousands of books written, okay, thousands of scrolls, and they cherry picked 66 for majority of the Christians, and of course Catholics have a little more. But they chose those books and said, this is the holy books, and you have to accept it because we said so. I don't know. For me, the Bible is a book of stories. And there's a lot of contradictions in it. There's a lot of myths in it. Why would I believe it? We don't even have the originals. None of it. None of it. We have tens of thousands of clay tablets from the time of Babylon. We have people who wrote business transactions. We have children writing in school and teacher fixing their writing. Okay, we have those, and they survived until today. And Almighty God couldn't possibly make a simple 10 commandments to survive until today, everything had to be vanished. So I'm like, I don't know if I trust that book anymore. The story of Jesus, great story. But truthfully, Jesus never wrote anything. If he truly cared about us following a book, why wouldn't he write to us a simple letter, a simple book of what to do, what not to do? He didn't. We don't have anything, at least. And then the story of that we read about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, for the longest time, I believed those were the guys who actually wrote this. They didn't. The names were added much later. The Gospels are not signed. We don't even know in what language it was written. We don't know when, by who. We have copies of copies at best. And I'm going to sit here and trying to figure it out what Jesus said in this word, in which word did he use? And in Greek, this word means that. I don't even know if he said that. Maybe just the writer who wrote this, he wrote whatever he thinks. The people who wrote the story about Jesus, they didn't even spend any time with him. And then yet, from hearing from other people, they wrote word for word what Jesus said, or what Pilate said, what his wife said in a private conversation, what Herod said to his people behind the closed doors. Like, they knew all this information. Somehow they were taking notes. They heard those conversations, and word for word, they were able to write it down. How? How? Inspired. I know if he was inspired, there would be no contradiction between one and the other, and there's plenty of them. So for me, Bible is simply a book of stories, and people made it holy, and I don't see it as holy. I don't see it as inspired by God. There's simply no evidence for it, at least for me. Number 12, why my family can't see what I see. Well, I was lucky enough that I managed to help my wife to see what I saw. But the indoctrination is extremely deep. And if you don't have time to sit with them pretty much every day and have those long, long discussions, remember, these people are trained several times a week, and they're preparing their minds, and they're preparing um, their answers for almost anything, right? And it doesn't matter whether it makes sense or not. What matters is, do we have an answer for this? And if you start thinking critically, and if you present black and white answers, fear kicks in. They are trained to fear you because you're from Satan. Every apostate is just a tool in Satan's hands, right? So we didn't see a lot of that stuff either. Don't blame them. I would say this: they have to experience something that will cause them to question. And when they're ready, they will come to you. What you have to do is you have to make sure that they feel comfortable coming to you if they have questions. If you're going to try to destroy their faith, if you're going to attack them, you're just going to reinforce their faith, nothing else. You have to show them that they are welcome to come and discuss with you no matter what it is. You could disagree, that's fine. You're not there to destroy their faith. The moment you start attacking them is the moment they're going to push back. Okay? You don't want that. You want to show them a better way. So if they say, "Oh, we are the best religion, we're helping the brothers." Yes, you are. You align with them. And you can also help people who are not witnesses, right? If there's a natural disaster, help your brothers by all means. And help those also who, who are not witnesses, but you see that there is a need, right? So you expand their love, you expand their understanding, you expand their thinking ability. You don't destroy it, you upgrade it. And that's how they're gonna come out of it by themselves. Okay, next one. Will I grow old and die? Yes, hopefully. I'm sorry, I don't want to bring the bad news. Hopefully, you grow old and die. I hope you're not going to die as a young person. We all have this dash, we born and death. I know for many people who believed in this the end of the world is near and you might never die. Even Jehovah's Witnesses are afraid of facing the facts. There was this elder that was coming to me and asking me certain questions, and we were going back and forth. And I asked him, like, he was so convinced that the end is just around the corner. And he told me, like, Jack, don't leave now. Like, the end is just so close. And I asked him, like, Peter, if you are so convinced that the end is just around the corner, would you go door to door and tell people that millions now living will never die? Would you tell them this? And then he's like, oh, well, because he knew where I was going. Because from the very beginning, okay, people thought the end is just around the corner. 1914, everybody's supposed to go to heaven. And then they just pushed the date over and over and over again until, the generation started dying out. And now it's the contemporaries and so on and on. They keep stretching and keep stretching, keep stretching. But they don't believe it either. Because if they truly believed it, that it's just so close, then they wouldn't build Warwick. Why would they build Warwick thinking that the end is just around the corner? Why would they start building this huge studio, okay, for movies if the whole Hollywood would be theirs in a matter of a few years? It doesn't make sense. They preach one thing, they do another. And most witnesses, unfortunately, fall for it because they're not planning for the future, thinking this is the end. And they're watching what the Watchtower is doing, and the Watchtower is preparing for the next 100 years. I'm like, what? That happened when my mom had to face the 1975. And my father, not being a witness, he's like, we're building a house. We're newly married or whatever. And my father gave me land. We're going to build a house. And everybody in the congregation said to my mom, what, are you crazy? The end is just around the corner. And there's no way that, there's no point. Go pioneering and this and that. And a priest approached my mom and he said, well, if you guys believe that the end is coming, then why in Brooklyn they purchasing buildings and they're building buildings if the whole world's going to be yours in just a matter of a few months? And then she's like, oh yeah, I'm building my house. If you want to be a successful person, do not do what the Watchtower is telling you to do. You do what they do. Do what they do, follow their example, and you're going to end up successful person. But if you do what they tell you to do, chances are you're going to end up broke and you're going to end up old, relying on the government to support you. Unfortunately, that's reality for way too many. Okay. Next. What if they are right? What if they're right? After all, every time we turn on the news, there's something bad happening and they're saying, see, that's the sign. What if they're right? There is no evidence, no concrete evidence that they are right. As a matter of fact, all the evidence point out the opposite. And what I mentioned before about the religious pareidolia, when you're basically connecting the dots because that's how they instructed things. Do yourself a favor. Grab the Bible and read chapter 24 of Matthew, Luke 13, and Luke 21 and Mark 13. The whole thing, not just the scriptures that Jehovah's Witnesses usually quote, but the whole chapter. And you'll see that it was all talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and it had nothing to do with our time. The only reason why Jehovah's Witnesses are saying that this prophecy has a fulfillment in our day is because Jesus did not return. So therefore, they're saying, well, he must have had double fulfillment, and the rest of the things that didn't come true, like Jesus flying on the clouds with a horse, right, and the sky getting dark and the sun not giving light and the moon turning into blood and the stars falling from heaven on earth, that didn't happen. Therefore, there must be a second coming, and on that second coming, some things from the prophecy will be fulfilled. Obviously, not all of them, because some of them was like, go pray that it doesn't happen on Sabbath, pray that pregnant women are not running in the middle of winter, run to the mountains when you see the Romans surrounding the city. Obviously, those things were only for the first century. So they cherry pick data constantly, right? So there's no evidence to point out that they are right. And the truth is just basically historically, mathematically, scripturally, it just goes really strongly against them, right? So you have nothing to worry about. At the same time, the same question is being asked in many different religions. I heard from Muslims, right? Muslims are like, okay, Muhammad is the true prophet. You cannot say that Jesus is the son of God. There's only one true God, and that's Allah. And they have the Quran, and they're basically saying, the same thing. And at the end, if you say you don't believe in any of it, they use the same sentence. What if we're right? What if we're right and you're wrong, and you're going to end up in hell? They believe it so strongly that they would justify killing, because if the apostate is causing people to leave Islam, then he will cause these people to end up in hell. And they're protecting people from hell. So it's better to kill one apostate than allow so many end up in hell. And we're doing a good thing. This is how they twist and justify even evil doing. This is why I believe that religion can turn good people into doing evil things because of those beliefs. But even the person who's trying to destroy others because of their beliefs, in his head, he rationalized it. He justified it by saying, I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting people from destruction by God. And that is also among Jehovah's Witnesses. They're thinking shining is good. It's a loving arrangement because we're helping people to return to Jehovah. That's what they say. That's what my own family said to me. And maybe yours said the same thing to you. That this whole world is like a Titanic and they're on this lifeboat. And maybe the lifeboat is not as comfortable as mine, but the narrow road leads to paradise while the wide road leads to destruction. We don't want to be comfortable now. That's what's happening. They're not right. And there is no reason to be fearful. As a matter of fact, there's reasons to be to rejoice that you stop doing this. So whatever time that you have left, you no longer have to sacrifice that time for doing things that are completely useless. Right? What is the purpose of life? Poof, you guys are asking tough questions. The beauty about being conscious and not being an animal that is basically driven by instinct is the fact that we get to choose. See, an ant that is born doesn't sit there thinking, what is my purpose of life? What am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do? What am I here for? If I'm going to die, there is no point of building a nest. No, the ant is born. We're building a nest. That's what I'm here for. That's my purpose. And voila. But humans have this unique opportunity to choose their purpose. And it's difficult for Jehovah's Witnesses because Jehovah's Witnesses were told what the purpose of life is, and it was very clear cut. And clarity is enormous, gives people enormous power. Sometimes the clarity, even though it's irrational, but it's clear. And people would prefer to have something clear cut and explained, even though the plan might be crazy, but at least we have a plan, right? There was a time when Columbus was sailing through sea and he doesn't know when he's going to make it. He doesn't know if he's going to discover something. And people started thinking, hey, this guy doesn't have a map. He has no idea what he's doing. Let's kill him. We go back to where we started. I mean, he's going to kill us all. We're just going to end up drowning, right? No food, no nothing. And what does he know that we don't, right? They want to kill him. And then other people said, no, don't kill him. He's the only one with a plan. He's the only one certain we're going to find land. Nobody else believes it except him. Don't kill him. We're screwed without it, right? So they didn't. and they discovered North America. Well, they were not the first people there, but they themselves discovered there's another land. So it's interesting when you put plan on front of people, people believe the vision. Even if the plan sometimes doesn't make sense, they will follow it. But now that you left the organization, you got to realize that you get to choose what your purpose of life is. You get to choose what your plan for your life is. And the best plan that you can possibly have is to try to improve the quality of life. If there is any one universal purpose in life for us humans, is to improve the quality of life. Improve the quality of life for yourself and other people and animals and this planet. Because when we see that what we do makes an impact and it improves the quality of life for others, it's when we feel fulfilled the most through impact. And you get to choose how you're going to do this. Whether you're going to be an electrician, a plumber, bricklayer, a doctor, a nurse, whatever you choose, whatever you do, you will make an impact. And the bigger the impact you make, the bigger difference you make in somebody else's life, the more you're going to feel fulfilled. Happiness, it comes and goes. Happiness comes with progress. Happiness is attached to your expectations. If your expectations are low and life gives you more than what you expected, you're going to be happy. If your expectations are high and the life gives you less than what you expected, you're going to be unhappy. So you can regulate your expectations to regulate your happiness. However, when it comes to fulfillment, long-time fulfillment, it's all about impact. It's all when we see that we've made a difference. So when you're asking for about purpose of life, I say this: choose to make impact on others, to improve the quality of life for yourself and others, and choose a path that'll give you the most fulfillment. And believe me, you have more than one purpose, because as a witness, you only had one purpose in life. That was like, we just have to expand God's kingdom, right? That was our purpose in life. But when you leave this purpose, you got to realize that you have many purposes in life, because everything that you put after the word I am defines who you are. I am a husband. Therefore, when I'm with my wife, I want to improve the quality of her life in our relationship. I am a father. Therefore, I will try to improve the quality of life for my kids, because I'm responsible for their life. I am an employer. I want to do the best I can that I can improve the quality of life for my employees, right? And so on and on. Whatever you say, I am, those are the purposes in life that you have. And you can have many of them. And you get to choose which one is the one that you want. And just because you are like this today, that doesn't mean you're going to be like that forever. Today, you are an employer. Tomorrow, you might say, forget it. I don't want to run a company. I want to work for somebody else. You become an employee. You try to be the best you can as an employee to improve the quality of business that you're helping somebody else to run. And then you're going to feel fulfilled. It's all about that. But remember, there's so much more to life than just one purpose that Jehovah's Witnesses gave you. And this is why so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses feel so devastated, because they only had one purpose. When that disappeared, they felt like their lives don't matter no more, because they hold only one purpose. But if you see that you're making an impact on so many people and so many people's lives, then your life expands. Then your life starts having a deeper meaning. And that's when your love expands, your purpose expands, your impact expands. You're upgrading your life. And then you look back, you're like, whoa, wow. They live in such a small community, such a small box, such a small mind. I would never be able to fit there anymore, because today I'm so much more. That's how you can find your purpose. What can I do with my life? Sorry, with my time. What can you do with your time? When you wake up as a witness and you stop going to the meetings, one of the things that you realize the quickest is, holy crap, I got so much time. No more service, no more meetings, no more reading of the books, right? There are so many things that I've been wasting my life on. No more standing on the street corner. So what to do with your time? I would say this. Number one, you have to focus on yourself. It sounds selfish, but believe me, when you create a better version of yourself, when you do the work on yourself, start studying, start reading books of smart people, okay, then you become better. And when you become better and people see your progress, it almost like gives them that courage to do the same. You cannot, if you're fat, okay, if you're obese and you can barely move and you can't even run, you cannot coach anybody how to be healthy, how to be fit, how to, run a marathon. You can't. I don't care if you read the best books and you have the best ways of coaching others. People will look at you like, no, I'm not taking your advice, even if it's great advice. If you're broke, if you don't have any money, you cannot teach anybody else about money. You can't. You can have the best advice, nobody will listen to you. You have to become the first student of success. Find out how people succeeded. Okay, study success. People who have success, they didn't accidentally fall there. Even people who inherited the money, even people who won a lottery, trust me, majority of them lose the money within 5 years because they're not trained. They didn't train their mind how to handle wealth. Find people who were in worse shape than you or the same situation you are. Then find people who succeeded even though they were in a worse shape than you are, and find out what steps they took. What were their beliefs? What were their values? What were their actions? What were their habits? And copy those. Okay. I did the same thing. I was like, I was completely broke. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know anybody who's successful. Like there was one guy in my congregation who had quite a bit of success. I approached him, but believe me, it was not a comfortable subject to discuss with people who are successful because you have to be humble, you cannot be materialistic, you have all those beliefs that tell you, oh no, you can be spiritual and have money and all that stuff. So I'm working on this guy's basement, not a GW, another one, who's a multi millionaire, and he's in his 30s. And then I found out that he is also an immigrant just like me and came to the Canada with nothing. I want to know what he did. I want to find out. I went up to him and I said, I'll work for you for free. I'm installing those tiles in your bathroom. I'll do that for free. I just need 1 hour of your time. You tell me how you did this. Okay. You teach me about this. And guess what? He did. And what he taught me that day made, I mean, I listened to his advice. I followed what he told me, and it turned out really well for me. The next person I went to, the woman was working as a financial advisor for one of the top banks in Canada, and I'm like, I'll fix your wiring problem for free. Teach me how to trade stocks, how to trade options, how to do all those things, because I took courses, but to be honest, I didn't understand any of it. It was way too complicated for me. I need somebody one-on-one. She took me on the offer, like, no problem. Have a seat. We'll go through it. I'll teach you what are your options, what is strike price, what is buying in the money, out of the money, and then all that stuff. She showed me the structure. Decades later, right now, I'm still practicing what she taught me. Become a student. You have time now. Don't waste it on just constantly looking and finding what's wrong with the watchtower and what Tony Morris tight pens is doing. Don't waste your time. You have time now, and believe me, if you spend quarter of the time that you spend before on reading the magazines, preparing for the watchtowers, going to the meetings, going to service, you take quarter of the time and you read about successful people. It will rub off on you and you will become successful and you will be able to help a lot more people. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Why and how people are on Earth. Why and how people are on Earth. You know what? It is a deep subject. The theory of evolution, I studied that quite diligently. And at the beginning, of course, I didn't believe it because what Jehovah's Witnesses taught me. But I tell you what Jehovah's Witnesses presented to me as a theory of evolution is totally different than what the scientists are saying. All what I can tell you quickly, okay, is you have a choice. You can believe that languages like Italian, Spanish, um, German, or Romanian, they all came from Latin language. that people spread across Europe. They didn't talk to each other. They experienced different things. They saw different things, and they started naming it differently. And with enough time, through the small challenges from one generation to another, people developed different languages. And that evolution of language happened over a long period of time. And the moment people were no longer able to communicate one with another, it's the moment we say that's a different language. There might be similarities. Some languages like Italian and Spanish and Portuguese are very similar towards one another, and other ones are like Polish, Slovakian, Ukrainian. They're also close, but they were separated usually by mountains or a river, and they didn't talk to each other. That's why the similarities are not so strong. But then you see there are dialects and there's accents. You see the difference between people speaking in North America or England or Australia, right, or South America. So you see how the languages change, and you can dig into the old literature and you see how from old languages that became dead, they went extinct, like Latin or Aramaic, or even Hebrew is kind of dying out now. How those languages are going into the past, they're dead languages, what we call them. And then the languages today that we have, they evolved. Nobody believes that Italian came from Portuguese or Portuguese came from Spanish. They all evolved from Latin. That's the root that it came from. And over time and small changes, that's where we have today. That's the story you can believe. That's the story that wherever we dig, we have evidence for it. But we don't have all the pieces. We, like, when it comes to the Asian world is here, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and so on, it's a little bit difficult to establish what language came from which one. But we can see definitely a totally different patterns in China as we have in North America or Europe. You can believe that story that they all evolved over a long period of time, or you can believe that some people tried to build a tower and God got jealous because he didn't want them to see what's in heaven. And then he mixed their languages, and this is how languages spread around the world. You have those two stories. Which one is more probable? And you have the same story when it comes to evolution or creation. You can believe that God just took some dirt and rock and mixed and abracadabra, poof, here's a human. Or you can start putting the pieces together and you see that no, we didn't come from monkeys, just like Italian didn't come from Portuguese, that monkeys and humans evolved together from common ancestors, okay? And just like Latin went extinct, the common ancestors went extinct. There are definitely things we don't know, okay? We can't have all the answers, but we have a lot of answers. So study evolution and you'll see where do we come from, and everything starts to make sense. You can believe that from Mount Ararat, the animals spread out all around the world somehow, or you can believe that all the continents used to be together and animals spread out all around, and then later on the continents spread, and we can actually still observe how fast the continents are moving away from each other, and we can put dates on it. And there is like a whole bunch of methods, like 7 different methods of how we can age things, and we can predict things also. So in the past we can predict, okay, this type of an animal lived here, and from that animal this is what we believed happened. And the scientists were able to draw certain links between one animal and another, and then they went looking for it and they found it exactly the way they drew it based on the theory of evolution. They decoded DNA. I don't have time to go into it, but DNA and decoding of DNA is by far the best and the strongest proof of evolution that we have. But it's a little bit complicated. It will take me a very long time, but there's tons of really good videos on YouTube. Educate yourself. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to believe it, but at least educate yourself on it. What really helped me is watching debates between scientists and theists. And I wanted to know why people believe what they believe. I wanted to know why people change their mind. I wanted to know why somebody who was an atheist became a believer, and when somebody who was a believer became an atheist? What convinced them? I wanted to know how people's minds work. And then I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And for me, that was the most important, is to educate myself, look at different perspective. The more perspective I will see is the best information I'm going to be able to get, and the best way of finding out what is the truth. That doesn't mean I accept it, but at least I will know the perspectives, right? And then the last one I think I already mentioned is the Bible inspired by God. Yes, so I already covered it. Wow, how long? Hour and a half. Sorry, I was planning to close everything within an hour, but knowing me, I started talking too much. If you guys have any questions, please put it on the comments. Sorry, I have not been really reading them. But if you have any questions, please shoot them right now, and I will be more than happy to answer them. Amazing live stream. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. The last will be theirs. Okay. Some people are just criticize the governing body. I understand, but believe me, if 10 years ago somebody asked me, hey, Jack, do you want to be a governing body member? And I would say yes, I would be teaching the same thing, because I believed it. I believed it very strongly. Somebody told me, hey, Jack, you want to take blood or you want to die? I would be like, I'll die. I'll be resurrected in a new system, because I believed it. I think they believe it too. We can blame the governing body all we want, but we were part of it. We were shining others. I shunned my best friend. I told my best friend, he told me that he was sleeping with some girls, and I told him, hey, I couldn't sleep. I said, listen, you told me all this stuff. You got to go to the elders. Oh, no, this is between me and Jehovah. No. Now you told me your sin. The sin is now mine, and it's heavy on my shoulders. No, you got to go explain it to them, right? I believed it. And then he got this fellowship. I shunned him. I was working with him, just me and him on the job, nobody else. And I wouldn't talk to him, because I believe I was doing the right thing. So believing I was helping him. There was a lot of things to do. That's brainwashing one-on-one. Okay. Any questions? Is it true historically that the body of elders, hold on, let me put this on here. Is it true that historically that the body of elders could be removed by the CEO if the congregation had no pioneers and no publisher report more than 4 hours per month? Painful CEO visit. Circuit of Vizier had this power basically to do almost anything with the congregation. That doesn't mean that he could get away with everything, but the purpose of a circuit of a seer is to make sure that the congregation is following all the instructions. And if the circuit of a seer sees that the congregation, for some weird reason, is not following all the instructions, and it's coming up with their own idea of how things should be, then the circuit of a seer could dissolve a congregation, could dissolve a body of elders. I've seen that happen. Okay, there was one case in California where the body of elders basically said, okay, you guys are asking us to sell the Kingdom Hall. Fine, we'll sell the Kingdom Hall, but we're not giving the money to Bethel, because that is a different corporation, and we were paying off the mortgage. We paid off the mortgage. Why would you take the money from the sale of the Kingdom Hall if we already paid the mortgage? That money is ours. And they dissolved the whole body of elders. Right? They had to replace them with somebody else. So, yeah, CEO can come and say, you don't follow what we say? Goodbye, Charlie. Okay, if that's all that you guys have for questions, then yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you have any more questions, please send them my way. Put them in the comments. I'll be happy to do another live stream answering your questions. See you in the next one.